private center, but Dr. Abdawad is well known as a good presenter, and he has a well-established NephroTube, and it is available. And I think you will find the link for NephroTube. He will present it to you. Dr. Abdawad is famous by his nice presentations and algorithms. Today, he will discuss the issue of anticoagulation in dialysis. Dr. Abdawad.
Thank you, Professor Hussein. Actually, I will talk about hemolysis anticoagulations. It is one of the most important topics that we meet in our practice. It is a very large topic to be covered in one lecture. Okay. Starting by the most or the well-known extrinsic and intrinsic clotting pathways that occur normally in our body for the formation of blood clot, starting by many of inactive proteases in our body that are activated in a sequence for the formation of blood clot. In hemodialysis patients, the precipitating factor that activates both intrinsic and extrinsic pathways is the contact of the patient's blood with the hemodialysis filter. This is why our patients on hemodialysis are at high risk for coagulation and for clotting during hemodialysis session. This is my talk outline regarding the different anticoagulation procedures that can be used during the hemodialysis session. There are heparin-related anticoagulant mechanisms, citrate-related, and others. I will talk in depth regarding the heparin-related anticoagulants, and I will talk in short regarding the other anticoagulant methods. Starting by the heparin-related anticoagulants, the most famous and the most commonly used heparin-related anticoagulant is the unfractionated heparin. The site of action of unfractionated heparin is by blocking the activated factor 10 and blocking of activated factor 2, which is the thrombin. Actually, unfractionated heparin acting by forming a complex with the circulating antithrombin 3. The unfractionated antithrombin complex attached to the activated factor 10 and inactivate it. Also, the length of the unfractionated heparin is long enough or tall enough to combine also to the activated factor 2 thrombin and inactivate it. This is how unfractionated heparin inactivate both factor 10 and thrombin factor 2. Many heparin administration methods are available. Actually, there is no ideal method or highly recommended method for the use of heparin. All methods are different center experiences. Generally, they are divided into three major methods: method A, B, and C. All of them started by initial bolus of heparin at the start of the dialysis session. Method A and method B using routine heparin initial bolus, which is a large initial bolus dose. Method C using a small dose initial bolus called tight heparin. Then they continue the dialysis session method A and method B by constant infusion heparin. Method B continue by one of two methods, by repeated bolus, many boluses after the initial bolus, or they only give the initial bolus without any further doses. Starting by method A, initial bolus followed by constant methods infusion. Different protocols are available. As I said, there is no ideal protocol. Some centers using unfractionated heparin during intermittent hemodialysis using an initial bolus of 2,000 international unit, following by infusion dose of 1,200 international unit per hour. The European Renal Practice Guidelines recommending initial bolus dose of 50 international unit per kilogram, followed by 800 to 1,500 international unit per hour. If the heparin is used for CRRT, one of the most famous recommendations is to use 30 international units per kilogram as initial bolus, followed by about 5 to 10 international units per kilogram per hour for infusion dose all over the session of dialysis, targeting activated partial thromboplastin time to be 1.5 to double the normal times. Do we need to monitor the heparin clotting tests during the heparin usage? Do we have to repeat the activated partial thromboplastin time to monitor the level of heparin in the patient's body? Actually, in practice, therapy is ordinarily done without monitoring of coagulation. And if we are afraid because the patient is at a risk of bleeding, actually we use heparin-free dialysis. So in practice, actually there is no one using the clotting test to monitoring the heparin in our hemodialysis patients, although it may be written in some texts and some articles. Regarding the second method, which is using routine heparin at the start, followed by repeated boluses or only the first initial bolus, different protocols are available. Some centers use 4,000 international units as initial bolus, followed by subsequent repeated bolus when needed if they felt that there is some clotting in the hemodialysis filter or machine or lines. This is my own center experience. We start with 2,000 international units as initial bolus, followed by 1,000 international units at the beginning of each hour or at the start of each hour of the hemodialysis. And some centers use 2,000 international units at the initial bolus without no repeated boluses. Regarding the tight heparin method, actually it is not popular and it is not used that enough. Its indication is mainly in patients who are at slight risk of bleeding. Actually, if there is a slight risk of bleeding or moderate to severe, we prefer mainly to avoid heparin as anticoagulant. So it is mainly used in patients with slight risk for bleeding. How it is used? They obtain a baseline clotting time, followed by initial bolus dose 750 international unit. Then they recheck clotting time after 3 minutes. If they didn't reach desired clotting time, they administer another supplemental bolus dose 750 international unit. If desired clotting time is reached, they start dialysis with heparin infusion at a rate of 600 international units. This is a minimum dose, tight dose of using heparin. Then they monitor the clotting time every 30 minutes. It is sophisticated and it is considered as a headache for the nursing staff and the doctors in the hemodialysis unit. So it's better to avoid heparin totally in patients with any level of risk of bleeding. Okay, if there is clotting in spite of use of anticoagulant, even heparin or others, if that means that I am not using the sufficient dose of heparin, yes, maybe yes, but don't always blame heparin, because there are many other causes that cause clotting of the circulating, the hemodialysis system, even if you are using the correct dose of heparin. So don't always blame heparin. There are many other causes. For example, retained air in the dialyzer, inadequate priming of the line and the filters, kinking of the dialyzer and the line, vascular access, inadequate blood flow, recirculation, or repeated interruption of blood flow due to repeated machine alarms and the nursing to stop the machine several times. And surely, if there is a problem within the heparin administration. So heparin is one of the many causes of the clotting of the filter and the line of the machine. Okay. But if there is recurrent clotting and I excluded all other causes, so we have to readjust and re-evaluate all our heparin dose. What are the main complications of heparinization? First of all is bleeding. Incidence of bleeding is about 10 to 50%. Mortality due to bleeding is as high as 15%. The risk of bleeding is proportional to the activated partial plastin time and not to the heparin dose, so it may be individualized in our patients. Not all patients may receive the same dose of heparin. One of the most important causes of bleeding, if or one of the most common manifestations of bleeding is post-therapy needle puncture site. After you remove the needle from your patient after the hemodialysis, you have a continuous bleeding which is prolonged. Many of us assumes because the patient has overdose of heparin during the dialysis session, but again, don't always blame heparin, because there are many other causes and important and common to cause the same presentation. Yes, you have to evaluate your heparin dose, but don't forget that outflow stenosis of the vascular access is one of the most common post-therapy needle puncture site bleeding due to high pressure, which delay the occlusion of the needle. And again, evaluate your nursing needle insertion technique. The second complication of heparin is heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. This is a large topic. I will cover it in very short words. Heparin-induced thrombocytopenia is heparin exposure plus thrombocytopenia plus minus thrombosis. The main cause is due to IgG antibodies that are formed against the platelet factor 4 heparin complex. The main management is to stop heparin, even unfractionated or low molecular weight heparin that I will talk about, and start non-heparin anticoagulants. This is in short. I recommend for you one of my lectures, which is heparin-induced thrombocytopenia on NephroTube website. I will put the link at the end of the lecture, that I talk in depth and in details in the causes and the management and dosing of anticoagulants in heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. Other heparin-associated complications: hyperlipidemia and lipid disturbance, hyperkalemia, reported cases with pruritus, reported cases with anaphylactoid reaction, especially with first use, reported cases of osteoporosis, and reported cases of alopecia. This is regarding unfractionated heparin. Regarding low molecular weight heparin, low molecular weight heparin has a lower or smaller molecular weight than unfractionated heparin. Actually, low molecular weight heparin is formed from unfractionated heparin by enzymatic degradation. The main site of action of low molecular weight heparin is mainly by inhibiting activated factor 10 and the slight weak effect against thrombin. This is because the length of low molecular weight heparin is short. So when it forms a complex with antithrombin, this complex is long enough to inactivate factor 10, but it is not long enough to inactivate thrombin activated factor 2. So this is why it has a good anti-factor 10 activity, but a weak antithrombic activity. Regarding the comparison between low molecular weight heparin and unfractionated heparin, low molecular weight heparin has a longer half-life, more rapid onset of action, higher bioavailability, more predictable effects, less non-specific binding to endothelium and platelets, less platelets and leukocyte activation, and it has no antidote. It is not reversible with protamine sulfate as unfractionated heparin. Regarding side effects, it has less risk of heparin-induced osteoporosis. It has less bleeding and less thrombocytopenia, but heat heparin-induced thrombocytopenia can occur with low molecular weight heparin. Less hyperkalemia, less disturbance of lipid profile, and anaphylactoid first dose as unfractionated heparin. Regarding the most important two complications for the comparison between low molecular weight and unfractionated heparin are bleeding and thrombosis. This is one of the most important meta-analysis comparing low molecular weight heparin and unfractionated heparin regarding bleeding as a major side effect. There was no difference between low molecular weight heparin and unfractionated heparin regarding bleeding from vascular access. Also, they compared both drugs regarding thrombosis. There was no difference between low molecular weight heparin and unfractionated heparin regarding the incidence of thrombosis of the extracorporeal circuit. This is why the European Renal Practice Guidelines recommend low molecular weight heparins as the first preferred line for to be used as an anticoagulant during hemodialysis than unfractionated heparin. But actually, low molecular weight heparin are very expensive, and as they are not superior to unfractionated heparin is widely used. Here and in Mansoura and in my city, Alexandria, the most commonly used is unfractionated heparin because it is of low cost in relation to low molecular weight heparins. If I will use low molecular weight heparin for intermittent hemodialysis, there is different dosing for different drugs, but the main idea that they have longer half-life, so single dose at the start of dialysis is efficient and sufficient. If there is extended dialysis session, splitting the dose is important. Regarding CRRT, can I use low molecular weight heparin? It is not widely used in CRRT. And even it has no reduced bleeding or increased filter survival and very low experience for the use of low molecular weight heparin in CRRT all over the world. How to be monitored? It is not monitored by activated partial thromboplastin time. It is activated by anti-factor 10E, which also is not available and difficult to be obtained. So this is one of the drawbacks to the use of low molecular weight heparin. One of the most important heparin-related anticoagulant methods is heparin-free dialysis, not use heparin. When not to use heparin, if the patient is high risk of bleeding, for example, if it's pericarditis, recent surgery, coagulopathy disease, thrombocytopenia, intracerebral hemorrhage, active bleeding, and even there are some centers that use heparin-free dialysis as the main protocol for anticoagulation for hemodialysis patients. I think here in Urology and Nephrology Center in Mansoura, they are using the heparin-free dialysis even if the patient is not at risk of bleeding. How to use this method? Start by heparin rinse. Rinse extracorporeal circuit with saline containing 2,000 to 500 units of heparin. Then drain the heparin containing priming fluid from your machine out of the dialysis machine by unheparinize the saline. Then set the blood flow rate at 250 to 500 ml per minute, and the periodic rinse, periodic washing of the hemodialysis filter and the machine during the dialysis session by about 50 to 250 ml saline every 15 to 30 minutes. The first step is optional, especially if the patient has heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, so I may avoid. And the periodic rinse is important to follow up the hollow fibers if there is a clotting fibers appear, so the rinse must be of a larger volume and more frequent. If I use the heparin-free dialysis for CRRT, it is better to use the pre-dilution method to prevent hemoconcentration in the dialyzer. And it is important to keep the blood flow at about 200 ml per minute or higher to prevent the stasis of the blood and the dialyzer anticoagulation. Regional anticoagulation with protamine reversal actually is a historical method now, but I will mention its main idea. Its main idea that when the blood came out of the patient, they introduce a very high dose of heparin to anticoagulate the blood. Then, when the blood is coming back to the patient, they administer the antidote of heparin, which is protamine, so to combine with heparin and neutralize the heparin. But actually, this is technically very difficult and rebound bleeding 2 to 4 hours after the end of the dialysis had been occurred. This is because the heparin-protamine complex that enters the patient's body is slipped away heparin-protamine by the reticular endothelial system, which will elevate the heparin level in the patient's body and lead to catastrophic bleeding. One of the methods of heparin-related anticoagulation is heparin-coated filter. Actually, this is under studies and experiments. Many studies used heparin-coated filter without systemic anticoagulation, and the results are not good. The coated membranes were associated with a significantly increased incidence of brain clotting, and they are not recommended. Regarding citrate-related anticoagulation, the main ideas, regional citrate anticoagulation, the main idea depends on this is the intrinsic and extrinsic pathway of coagulation. One of the most important playmakers for coagulation in our body is calcium. So if I block the calcium, I will prevent the clotting. This is the main idea of the regional citrate anticoagulation. This is our patient. When the blood comes out from the patient, we introduce citrate. Citrates chelate free anionize the calcium, so the clotting system or clotting mechanism will not work out. It is important that these patients will have hypocalcemia, so I have to replace calcium for the patient to compensate the chelated calcium with citrate. Okay, and the important issue that citrate that will enter the patient's body, the anticoagulants that I use, citrate is metabolized primary in the liver to bicarbonate, so there is a risk of alkalemia. So I have to decrease dialysis solution bicarbonate in this method. What are the major problems in regional citrate anticoagulation? Hypocalcemia and hypercalcemia if the replacement is less or more than what I need. Hypernatremia because the citrate is in the form of hypertonic sodium citrate. And metabolic alkalosis, as we said, that citrate is metabolized to bicarbonate. Regarding this complex methodology of citrate, but if we compare the regional citrate versus heparin anticoagulation, we will find that regional citrate anticoagulation reduces the bleeding risk more than heparin anticoagulation. Regional citrate anticoagulation has similar or better efficacy on circuit patency. Regional citrate anticoagulation reduces neutrophil and complement activation that extracorporeal circuit. That is why KDIGO guidelines recommend regional citrate anticoagulation as the primary used method for all patients with risk of bleeding or without risk of bleeding if they are acute kidney injury with systemic disorder or systemic disease or hemodynamically unstable, especially even if there is high risk of bleeding or not. So it is widely used for CRRT but not intermittent hemodialysis. Although this, in my city, Alexandria, there is only one center using regional citrate anticoagulation. It is very difficult to use, and I don't think that it is. Here also in European Nephrology Center, there is experience for regional citrate anticoagulation. Citrazate, it is a bicarbonate dialysis solution with low concentration of citrazate citrate. It is actually under study and there is no good results regarding its use till now. Heparinoids, these are not heparin or citrate related heparinoids. Say for example, danabrinoid and fondaparinux are anticoagulants blocking activated factor 10. The most important disadvantage of these drugs, they have a very long half-life in renal impairment patients, so there is a high risk of bleeding, and their primary use in hemodialysis patients is in the management of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. When I can't use heparin, I can use one of those, and you will find the details in the lectures that I announced related to heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. Other drugs are direct thrombin inhibitors, as argatroban, livaridine, which is not present now, replaced by recombinant uridine, and bifenthrin are antithrombin factors. Again, the most important side effect is that they have prolonged half-life in our patients, and their primary use is the management of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. Finally, platelet inhibiting agents, they mainly prostacyclin. There are not only limited clinical experience with prostacyclin and a few published reports of its safety and efficacy. To collect my talk, anticoagulation selection, the first which we talked about is routine unfractionated heparin with constant infusion, can be used in intermittent hemodialysis, CRRT, but the patient bleeding risk must be no risk. Routine unfractionated heparin followed by boluses or no boluses can be used for intermittent hemodialysis, can be used for CRRT. It is important that the patient bleeding risk is zero. Tight minimum dose heparin with constant infusion can be used for intermittent hemodialysis, CRRT. Its patient's bleeding risk must be slight minimal. Low molecular weight heparin can be used in intermittent hemodialysis and CRRT, but it is not widely used in CRRT and there is limited experience. It is important that the patient has no risk for bleeding. Heparin-free dialysis can be used in intermittent hemodialysis, CRRT, with any risk of bleeding, slight, moderate, or high. Regional anticoagulation with glutamine reversal, it is not used anywhere. Heparin-coated filter, it is under experimental studies and is not recommended. Regional citrate anticoagulation is recommended only for CRRT and it is used or can be used with any patient's bleeding risk. Citrazate, it is not recommended till now, it is under experimental studies. Heparinoids can be used in intermittent hemodialysis, CRRT, and its primary use is for the management of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. Direct thrombin inhibitors are the same as heparinoids. And finally, platelet inhibiting agents are not recommended till now. This is the website that contains the lecture of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, www.nephrotubecd.com, and it contains many multiple lectures related to nephrology. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad Abdul for this excellent presentation and the practical presentation, and very comprehensive. Include a lot of ways to anticoagulate the extracorporeal circulation. Now it's open for questions. Questions? Yes, please. The mic, please.
The presentation was very good. I just want some practical advice. Back at home, we have a problem when it comes to the use of the graft, AV graft, especially in elderly people. Whether we use heparin or don't with heparin, so there's always a problem of clotting in the elderly patients using grafts. I don't know if there's anything extra that can be done in management of elderly patients that have AV grafts, especially low AV grafts. Every graft is every time
to prevent thrombosis.
Thrombosis, yeah. Because every time they come for dialysis, there's challenges. They come.
There is no difference between the molecular function. The main idea is to reach target clotting time, maybe 2 times the normal value. Whatever the method of anticoagulation that we will use, no difference between unfractionated or
Any other question? Yes, please.
I have a question on heparin, on dialysis heparin free. Let us say that they start put a dose of heparin in saline, and then after you rinse. How can you say that is heparin, and how can we be sure that after the 2 rinse there is no heparin in the bloodline?
You asked about what the heparins are used for rinse, and we wash it out. Yes. The question is, how this heparin will work?
How can you be sure that there is no heparin?
Some of the molecules will attach to the fibers of the chloro fibers of the filter, okay, and will attach to the line itself. This will decrease the risk of coagulation. It is not that major action, but it is going to decrease the clotting. It is not actually the use systemic, but some of the different molecules will attach to the whole fibers of the filter to the line and decrease the incidence of
دكتور الميكروفون الترجمه ما سمعتش اي حاجه.
Okay. The main idea of the heparin-free dialysis, the main idea of the rinsing with heparin is that some of the heparin molecules will attach to the hollow fibers of the filter, which will act when the patient's blood will enter the filter. It is not effective as the systemic or extracorporeal heparin anticoagulation, and even as I said, you can skip this step if the patient has heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. Okay, it is not a major concern or not a powerful effect, but it decreases the incidence of clotting. Not that much, but it has effect. But the most important is in this method is the frequent rinsing. It is more important than the initial heparin in the rinsing or the priming.
Do you have another question? Thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad Abdul, for your excellent presentation. So it's now my pleasure.